Welcome to the Talking About Some Names podcast, otherwise known as the BWI Live Recruiting Show. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr. Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz are experts in Penn State football recruiting, reporters that cover this stuff better than anybody else, in my humble opinion. We're going to be talking about what's going on through spring football so far. Now, we're at the halfway point. Yesterday on the live show, Greg and I discussed the halfway point, the storylines for Penn State football. Going to have a similar conversation here on the live show with recruiting. And we're going to discuss, how things are going, like just a check-in of how's all this setting up for what is very important. And the most important part, which would be official visit season coming up at the end of May and into June. Some other things on the way as well, including your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, prayers, and concerns. We'll get all of that here on the show today. But first off, Ryan, how you doing today? And what's new in your world? What's on the top of your mind for Penn State football recruiting or your life? Like how are the kids?
Good, man. Got baseball starting up this week. Excited. Although it's raining nonstop.
You're the coach. You're the coach, right?
2 teams this year. What the
You're
hell
the coach
was I
of
thinking?
2 teams.
Brutal. Yeah. Bad idea. Anyway, it's been raining so much I haven't gotten a swing of things yet, but I'm sure in May I will be pulling out my hair. But it's actually been a good thing because work has been busy. Penn State has now hosted over 60 scholarship recruits in the 2026 and 2027 classes over the first half of spring ball. We've got another 40 right now confirmed, and let's be honest, that number will probably end up being closer to 70 or so scholarship guys in the second half. So lots to come. Then we got the contact period in May nowadays, which is even busier than ever before. It used to be the spring eval period, but now you can talk to recruits and all types of different things. So recruiting is fully in the swing, and it is not going to stop until I would think mid-July-ish, for being honest.
Yeah, because then we get into breaking news, commitment season, piling up the class of 2026. And, that is not even to mention, Ryan, you've been tracking the 28 guys that are coming in as well. So, it's full on, all go, all gas, no brakes for Penn State recruiting. And Fitz, on the other side of things, has been working on recruiting, but also on the Penn State football team proper, as we've been checking out practice. And we haven't had you on the show and a chance to get your thoughts on Penn State practice. I know you wrote a little bit about what we saw and heard yesterday, giving some more context and updates on some of that stuff at bluewhiteillustrated.com. So just generally, what were your thoughts of practice this week? We didn't get a chance to debrief afterwards.
Yeah, it was a longer session. Unfortunately, no one-on-ones, and those are usually the most entertaining for entertainment value's sake. Those are the ones that you can, sort of sink your teeth into, and didn't get any of those this week. Maybe we'll get some next week. Who knows? But we appreciate the time regardless. Of course, longer session. You and I kind of stood there and watched the defense, and we were just like, okay, guys, it's time to do something. So I moved over to the offense, saw some good stuff over there. I'm impressed by the running backs, which is, the basic level of understanding for Penn State football this year. The running backs are good. That competition behind Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, I think, is pretty close. And I include Tyke Hayes in that. And I saw, some really good stuff. You and I were talking a little bit about, just his natural feel for some of those drills, some of the things that they do. And I thought that was impressive to see that. Moved over to the quarterbacks. I think the backup job is very much up in the air. Like, I think Jackson Smolik has come out and done a really, really nice job this spring. And that's from just like talking to people and watching him. Like, you can see it. Like, you can see him. I don't know what Russ looks like for a guy coming off a knee injury that's quarterback, but like, you can see him stepping into throws. You can see him comfortable. You can see him moving around. And I think that's a very positive sign, as those two guys are pretty close. And that's kind of what you want, right? You want them coming out of spring ball and feeling that they're in it very close with one another into fall camp, because that's number one, how you keep your roster together. And it's number two, how you get a backup ready for behind Drew Aller. So I'm very excited to see how that one continues to go, because I think those are two really good quarterbacks.
Can I ask you a question? We talked about with the backup quarterback position and the kind of concern that I may be a little dismissive of here on the show, because I'm looking at it one way or the other. The idea of getting you through a game versus a long-term injury to your starter. Do these guys give you the confidence that they could get you through a Wisconsin, like last year with Bo Perbula? Do you feel like they're at the level where they can operate the offense? And I know that a lot of this is kind of speculation, but just generally your feedback, your view of what you've heard and seen. What's your level of confidence in those guys being able to, if they needed to, step in and not in the long term, kind of in that microwave of we need to get out of this game and get a win?
Yeah, there's no games in April, so that's good, because we haven't seen enough to determine how one of those guys is going to step if you are going to throw the ball if you throw him into the fire. Physically, I'm fine with it. The talent is there. Like it's pretty. I think it's pretty evident when you watch these guys throw the ball. The talent is there. The difference here is last year we went to practice and it was Drew and Bo right beside each other, and then you go down to Grunkmeyer and Smolik was in there a little bit. Just he couldn't do anything because of the not cleared to do anything. But and then you got Jack Lambert to walk on as well. But the tiers this year is kind of Drew by himself, and then it drops down to those other two, and then you've got Beckham, Kritza, and Lambert again. So I think it's just a different sort of combination where you looked at Bo last year and you felt pretty confident just based on the player that he was. Like usually that's the formula, right? It's not a guy that's going to come in and throw the ball around and dice you up in the secondary and figure, I've got a theory that just backup quarterbacks with no tape against them. I mean, the ceiling is the roof or whatever, Jordan. It's one of those that fools us every time, right? They come in and they light the world on fire, and then the next week when there's game tape, they're not as hot. Bo was a different story in the sense that he could come in and do things athletically that kind of combined the run game, opened up the run game. Got to undoubtedly threw some nice passes, but he's more of a playmaking type guy than a guy that's going to sit there and dice you up. So that guy has the advantage when he steps into the game. Are Grunkmeyer and Smolik that? Not necessarily. I think they're a split between Drew and Bo, which is great. You want that hybridization or whatever you would call it. But I'm not there yet. That's a big ask for those guys. And like I said, there's no games in April, so that's a good thing.
All right. So I will be the one on the limb. I will be all the way out there, which is not, I'm used to it. I'm used to being out here dangling on the farthest limb of these takes that I have here on the show.
Well,
I always appreciate
it's all you. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I accept the risks of this particular conversation as they are, which hopefully by September nobody remembers. One thing you do need to remember is that the future is always coming, and it will be here sooner than you know it, and you need to plan for that future. There's volatility everywhere in life, and if you can navigate it, you're an expert. Now, maybe you have that expertise and you want to put it to work for yourself in business, finance, whatever it might be. If you've got business expertise, maybe you have a particular trade that you know a lot about and you want to branch out on your own. My Perfect Franchise, Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise is the guy that can help you with that. So instead of starting a business from scratch, from the ground up, finding a brick and mortar store or building your own website or anything, you can buy an established brand with business practices, a structure that has stability, and you can manage one of these franchises. Work for yourself within the team. And Andy's going to help you do that if you're interested. His services are 100% free, and this is his job. He owns his own franchises, and he's bought into multiple franchises himself, so he knows this process. It's 100% free to you. His services to you, he takes you through the entire process from beginning to end. He's explained it to us 100 times now, and I still don't quite understand it because I have skills. Business skills are not among my skills. So call him. 404-973-9901 or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. He is plugged into the business community. He goes to seminars. He goes to conferences. He understands the trends, the fads, and he's a straight shooter from what I understand. And I don't mean that in the sense that anyone who just says words out of their mouth anymore is a straight shooter. He'll tell you when he doesn't know something, a wild thing. He was talking about AI, and he's like, I have no idea how any of this applies to business, but people keep using the term. So he's going to give you all the good, all the bad, and everything in between. If you want to have that conversation with a guy who's going to do that, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, get on his calendar, have a conversation with him. We appreciate him being a sponsor here on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Now, let's talk about before we get to recruiting, we do have to address some of the things that are coming up in spring camp. And I just wanted to start this particular part of the show before we get into the nuts and bolts with Ryan and Fitz talking about recruiting is the transfer portal. Names are already going into the transfer portal today. There was an Appalachian State offensive lineman that put his name in the transfer portal. I was just scrolling through social media. I saw that today. There have been names yesterday. This is going to start ramping up while Penn State is in the middle of spring football. These things affect recruiting. They affect numbers. They affect the team. So I figured we should have a conversation with the people who talent acquisition is talent acquisition. These guys have the inside information. They have the perspective, more importantly, on how Penn State's going to pursue all of these things, because it feels like a delicate balance. And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but Ryan, I just would like you to set the scene for us for the portal. What are you expecting from Penn State next week? How are you expecting them to address this when the portal opens the day after they have practice?
Well, honestly, I'm not expecting a lot, if I'm being blunt. Straight shooter, right? Isn't that what we were just talking about?
Yes.
Do you expect a lot, Sean? I look, outgoing, yeah, there might be some after the blue-white game, but the spring portal has been a dud, I feel like, for 2+ years now. And sure, there may be some guys who pop in, but the way a lot of these NIL contracts and things work, like the talent that often goes in the portal in the spring are guys who really don't fit Penn State, if I'm putting it bluntly. They are looking for money. There are different things oftentimes. Now, there you will find different examples of guys that work, and obviously Penn State's gotten some guys out of the spring portal. But, to get a stud wide receiver or something like that would really pop and be big, I think the chances of it are low. Maybe a defensive tackle, but again, like if you're a quality defensive tackle going in the portal in the spring, you probably have a feel for already where you're going. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And 2, it's going to cost a lot of money. And now Penn State will certainly, they have money to do that stuff, but some of the figures that are out there just don't align with how the importance that Penn State puts on not screwing up their locker room. So,
or the quality of the talent, right? So Fitz, this is something you always talk about when it comes to players in the spring portal. These might be guys that didn't win a camp battle. So if you're not winning a camp battle at another school, Penn State's I think they're a top 5, 10 program. They're the likelihood, unless it's coming from a position where you're coming from a school, the Alabama or Ohio State wide receiver rooms from like 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, where it was 4 first-round draft picks. Maybe that's the situation, but again, that might fall into what Ryan was talking about of price tags and all of those things. So I guess what's your initial view of this as well?
Yeah, I think it's more about the talent, really. Like I understand the delicate balance of the locker room, but also we talked about this on the show on Tuesday. Some of those positions, like wide receiver, it's kind of been thrown out the window because you need success, you need results, and I think that's really what it goes into more than anything. So you still, like, just because you have money, just because there are players out there, you still have to spend wisely. I mean, this isn't a situation where you just kind of sign a 1-year deal with a guy that's, you probably pay him a little bit more and then you just don't get anything on the back end. Like, I think that's really what you look at. And I agree with Ryan, the guys in the spring portal, and there have been exceptions. Absolutely. I mean, they got Chop Robinson out of the spring portal a couple of years ago. They got O'Davian Collins out of the portal in the spring a couple of years ago. So there is possibility, but they have to be, I don't want to call them unicorns, but they have to be, very special situations. So you've got guys that are coming out, and I really think the vault for portal guys is the winter. You're coming off the season, you got fresh tape. You get a chance to go through spring practice, which is a big deal. Like these guys that if they sign a guy from the spring portal will not have spring practice. We saw with Dante Cephas a couple of years ago. It doesn't always work out that well when you bring in a guy late. So you've got, excuse me, an opportunity to do some things, but I don't see it. I mean, you look at last year, the guys that left Penn State in the spring, Davon Townley, London Montgomery, Malik McLean, King Mack, of course, came back, Malik Mega, and Keandre Lambert-Smith. I mean, Keandre Lambert-Smith's the only one that moves the needle in that group, really. So you've got an opportunity to, I don't want to say clear out your roster, but sort of reshuffle the deck. You've got a lot of guys that are on the roster, and they'd like to keep all those a bunch of those walk-ons around. They'd like to keep a bunch of those scholarship guys around because you're not sure what's going to happen with the house settlement entirely, with the flexibility on that 105 number. So yeah, I think it's a unique situation, and you really cannot. I would not pin hopes on a guy coming in the spring and being a big time player. Like it's happened before, especially with Chop. But at the same time, it's I think that's more exception to the rule, and it's kind of where we lean on that one.
So it It is interesting. The thought in my head when framing this conversation was, if you're bringing guys in to visit, I mean, I assume they're still going to do a little bit of research on some of these guys, make sure that they know kind of the facts and figures behind everything. If you're bringing guys in for a visit, does that affect the roster at that position? Like, I guess is there a balance of having to not prematurely kick guys into the portal just because you're bringing guys in at their position? Is that even a part of the conversation or the equation in this?
I think the conversation here is, okay, so Z-Man in the chat wants a defensive tackle. Okay, there's a lot of defensive tackles on the roster. Say you spend for a defensive tackle and you've got backups going for $500,000, $600,000, whatever they wanted this offseason. That was absurd. You bring him in, and what if he's on the same level as Ty Blanding or one of those redshirt freshmen? All of a sudden, like that's where the problem comes in. The guy comes in and he's good, and he's, if he's chop and he comes in, hell yeah, spend you like the guys around him, you're making everyone better. If he's not, and we've seen guys that have come in and they're not what you thought they were, or what Penn State maybe thought they were, or I think nationally we've seen Dante Cephas ranked really high, Julian Fleming ranked really high, all those guys, but they're not what you thought they were, and some of those signs were pretty apparent pretty quickly. Then that's a problem. Like, that's kind of where you find yourself, especially in the spring portal, when you've only got a couple of months till the next season. And then you've got to protect yourself against the portal, because schools are going to come poaching. Schools are going to come look at positions where you're battling and likely to have a glut of talent. You look at where Penn State's at in the offensive line, and they're incredibly healthy, and they're like that room from a like a mindset perspective, like that group collectively is very healthy. But there's a lot of guys there. So you see a lot of guys there. That's maybe a window to wiggle your way in if you're an opposing school, and you can see them coming after some players. So, you're kind of fighting on a couple of fronts here, and it's probably pretty exhausting. I'm not going to lie. But the upside can be great, or it can really, kind of stab you in the ribs there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it feels like this is a dry well in terms of what you guys have just laid out. Of there's not going to be a ton of intrigue from the perspective of bringing guys on campus, cycling through, trying to find the right fits in those things. But Ryan, any last thoughts about kind of the portal and the setup for Penn State? Because they have, in a way, set this up where the window closes after the spring game. So is there messiness on the back end, or how do you view this from Penn State's perspective of managing its roster of what Fitz just laid out of poaching and kind of those things?
Well, we still don't know the scholarship number from the NCAA, which is another interesting tidbit of all this.
Is that coming in the next week or two as well? Like,
I don't think so. No, not officially. But I don't expect. I don't expect a lot of outgoing. I don't expect a lot of incoming. I'm not saying that there won't be one or two here or there on either side, but if you're on this roster right now, well, unless you're a junior who's third string, something that really surprised you or upset you, whatever it may be, like, why would you want to leave to start? Like, you're on a team right now that should genuinely compete for a national championship this year. And, if you spent multiple years here, like this is an opportunity that Penn State's been hoping for and aiming for a long time. And on the other end, I mean, like when you guys were talking, I'm on the page right now trying to find like last year's best receivers in the portal for spring and all that. Like, Silas Bolden is like the best one I could find at the top of my head as far as the talent that went in there. He ended up going to Texas. He had 20 receptions last year, was previously at Oregon State. There might be somebody I'm missing. I haven't got to scroll through all of it, but like I get like the talent that's there.
Yeah.
Isn't what I would say is going to make a difference for Penn State this year, especially when you already have, Kieran Hudson and other guys, Devontae Ross.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out, of course, here at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel here. The best way to get this information is to join us over at the site for $1. You get a week of access to try us out, and then you can subscribe for a year if you want to after that first week. But we've got something very special going on right now through all that information. Here's the thing. It's like, you want to get in, you want to get the portal information, you want to get the recruiting information, you don't want to wait. That's the best thing to do. But I do want to give a thank you to the people that have taken a chance on us here on the YouTube channel as well. Maybe a little incentive for the 52% of the people that watch this show that aren't subscribed to actually hit the button, which is a free act. not only is it free for you to hit the button to say subscribe and just throw a little bit of token support behind us, which helps us out tremendously on this end, I'm going to give something to you, potentially. Everyone who subscribes, new subscribers between now and the Blue-White weekend, we're going to pick 5 people. Those people are going to win a subscription for a year to the site. So check us out here and BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for all that great information, content, and conversation. Like, that's what I do. Shooting the stuff, talking about backup quarterbacks, giving you some football insights and things like that. It's a conversation. It's a relationship here on the site. We appreciate everyone who's here in the chat, like Steve, who was, I think, here before I was. He might have been here before the show was actually live on YouTube.
Steve's like always here. Like he's like, it could be like Saturday at 8 p.m. and he's here. So we appreciate
you, Steve.
We love it.
And real quick, just because I spent so much time on this, Keandre Lambert-Smith was the best receiver in the portal last year. And I just went through and I've been tallying the math. Roughly about 70 to 80% from what I'm seeing here, all downgraded. Went from P4 to G5, basically. Yeah. And that's just looking at wide receivers last year. Sorry, I had to get that in there. I just spent 5 minutes tallying it up.
I do love the fact that we have a fact finder here on the show who's going to go get that information for us when we need it live. I don't have the brain capacity to do that. Okay, let's reset. Let's talk about Penn State recruiting, which is what everyone's here to get the information on. And Ryan, I'm coming back to you as our fact finder and as our guy who's going out and getting these conversations with recruits and parents and people around them. You spoke to Luke Wafle's dad, I believe, earlier this week. Obviously, Luke Wafle is a 5-star or potential 5-star defensive end who's interested in Penn State, been here quite a bit, was here recently. What was your big takeaway from that conversation? Positive, overly positive, got you really excited, leading towards a commitment? I'm trying to get everyone here in the chat that wants you to hear, like, yeah, he's coming to Penn State. Like, what do you got? What do you got for us?
Well, the big takeaway is when your son goes to number 19 in the country, schools are very interested in you. And not that they weren't already, but
they don't look at rankings, Ryan. You know that. No,
they don't, apparently, until they change. And then money and a lot of things start going this way. But no, it's a good conversation. Obviously, his brother's here, right? And I think a big storyline in this recruitment is going to be Owen Wafle and how he adjusts the time at Penn State, how things go. And obviously the feedback there has been very positive. Not only is he adjusting well, but also, I mean, there's a lot of positive talk that Penn State's very happy with, the way he's adjusted and what he's showing out there. I'm not saying he's going to come in right, this year and play 250 snaps or anything like that, but I think they're pretty positive with what they have there. So obviously his progression and how things go over the next couple of months is going to play a big part with Luke. I think Ohio State and Texas are Penn State's competition there, though. And those two are both obviously very aggressive schools and will be aggressive with Luke Wafle. I think it's important to say that, while we're just talking about, those rankings jumped and all that. Well, Texas and Ohio State have been on him for a long time, as has Penn State and as has most of the programs he's considering. Florida was one of the recent offers, and so was Clemson. He did visit Florida, and I think a Clemson visit will come. We'll see, though. Oklahoma, USC are also going to probably get visits this week. I think he's at one of those campuses now, and we'll go to Texas on Monday. But this is all points to Texas, Ohio State, Penn State at the moment. And I think it's pretty even between the three. I think, again, having his brother here will be massively important. It's a big part of it. With that said, if either of those other two schools want to get aggressive financially, I think that has to be Penn State fans need to keep that in mind. Just because, again, we've gotten to the point now where he is a potential 5-star player, and that does impact some things. So I feel good about Penn State chances. I wouldn't call them a favorite or, a lock or none of that kind of stuff. His brother is here. He's having a great time. The family is incredibly happy. Deion Barnes, relationship-wise, everything's very good. But again, you're going against two of the best programs in the country for his commitment, or at least as of now, that's how it's aiming to be.
Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, and I will say, if we're going to play the card where you're looking at guys who are taking visits and feeling very good about schools after visits elsewhere. You're going to play that card here too. Like he's probably feeling pretty good about his visit with Penn State, and he's going to be back, obviously, so that they continue to build on that. So it's just one of those things when you're looking at some of the top targets. Yeah, it's great after the visit, and you hear great comments from a bunch of players after their Penn State visits and after their visits elsewhere. But like jumping on that train so quickly is a dangerous game. So, but I think Penn State's in a great spot. I really do. You look at what he's looking for, and beyond his brother being here, I think Penn State checks an awful lot of boxes. And then you throw Owen Wafle into the mix, and you can watch both boys play, and you can be around those guys, and I think they're pretty close. I mean, this is not a situation if my brother went somewhere, I wouldn't go there, like that. I don't think that's a situation that, that they're in this family. So I think a lot of the things make sense for Penn State regardless. Then you throw Owen on top, and I think it makes a ton of sense. So I do feel, pretty good about Penn State's chances, but as you mentioned, I mean, there's some heavy hitters in there. Ohio State, Texas, he's been to Tennessee, likes Tennessee. So there's a lot going for a lot of schools, but I think probably more going for Penn State than anyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Quick question here. This is again patented T. Frank curveball. We talk about Penn State's success with hybrid rushers, Micah Parsons, and Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson, guys that are 6'3". There's not as much documented getting guys that are 6'6", going to be 260 to the NFL. So I guess if you're looking for advantages, does Denai Dennis Sutton's presence on the roster help at all in terms of, okay, so there's a guy here that looks like you, plays like you somewhat, that we can say this guy's successful at the college level. We develop all defensive ends, not just guys that wear 11. Is that a fair part of the conversation here with a guy like Luke Wafle?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment, because there's no real, like Penn State years ago with John Scott, they wanted to go 6'4", 6'6", 34-inch arms, athletic guy. Now, those guys are aliens, obviously, and it's, there's not too many of those walking around. Then all of a sudden, Arnold Ebiketie comes in, and he's 6'2", and a half, something like that, and sort of changes the math for them. So nothing is impossible for, a 6'1" to 6'5" defensive end here. Like, I think that's kind of got to be Deion Barnes's mantra here, is he's developed all shapes and sizes, had success with them. Denai is not Abdul. He's not Chop, but I think you need to use that if you're recruiting, guys that aren't in that mold, because not many are. So I'm really excited about defensive end moving forward, just based on what we've seen, what we've heard. Like, I think there's a significant gap there between Denai and Zariah at the top, the older guys that are, have been around for a long, long time. And then the freshmen, the redshirt freshmen, we saw a lot of Ivan Kamaju, and it's looks very promising there. But yeah, you kind of feel good about that. And then you just kind of got a stack. And it's a conversation we've had on the message board about, Penn State's had Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter, Chop, Ebiketie, like top 2-round picks at defensive end. Does that help you recruit? It does. But at the same time, it's not like, this is not Ohio State's wide receiver room. You still got to recruit him. You still got to make that happen. And
you still got to put in the effort. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, when Carter Meadows goes from a 94 star to a number 6 player in the country, or whatever he is on a 3, mm-hmm. As Ryan mentioned, that changes math as well. And it's a different kind of math. It's not the statistical analysis. It's more the monetary analysis. So those guys will continue to rise, I think. And I think they've done a wonderful job scouting, because beyond that, you've got a really good defensive end board that, features some in-state guys like Jackson Samuels Ford and Ashton Blatt. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of options around for Barnes there on the edge this year. And I think that it's still stacking up to be a really good spot for them.
Right.
I just want to add, I think Luke Wafle's a better athlete than Denai too.
Yes.
Would you agree with that, Sean?
Yeah, I think so.
We don't have testing numbers on him and all that, so I don't want to jump too much into that.
He's more
boat.
fluid. Like, he's more fluid. He moves a little better from a lateral sense than
right.
Denai was a 5-star because he was an awesome player, great build. Yeah. You could build around that, and you can be a first-round draft pick without being a testing freak, because I don't think he's a testing freak. So I think Wafle's in that category, but there's nothing to be ashamed of with that category. I'll say that.
Right. And that category is a lot of SEC schools, though. Like, you get that a lot more down south, as far as bigger defensive ends, kind of a little bit more like Denai, where, Penn State and even Ohio State to some degree with some of their guys, like, they have a little bit more success with the speed and athleticism type of mold. I think.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, Ohio State hasn't been churning out guys that are 6'6", 265, and are all obvious first round draft picks. You go and you talk about the guys they have in this particular draft class. I think there's a feeling that Jack Sawyer's a good football player, but he's not Chase Young. Like, even Ohio State has a couple of guys like that, but they are hard to find and they're hard to get. I'd say even some of the guys that become those freaks of nature are guys that develop later in life. And Fitz, this goes to your point about offensive linemen. And when you have a guy that is 6'6", 270 pounds as a ninth grader, there's not anywhere to go. And sometimes the athleticism doesn't maintain its lead. If there's all these classic examples of guys that were small who then grew later in life and retained their small athlete abilities and became the freak shows that we all know. Now, there's no one way to build all these things, but it does go to, like, they're hard to find the elite of the elite that become the best. Because defensive end is, how big are you? How fast are you? How athletic are you? Like, in the general sense of athleticism. And those are the guys that go in the first round in the NFL draft, which is what we're talking about. The reason I'm talking about the draft is that's the conversation when you start with guys that have the body type like this.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is you've got guys that have turned into freaks. Micah Parsons ran a 4.6 at camp in high school. And hey, that's awesome because he can move. He was always a fantastic player. Always, you could tell he was a different level than everybody else. He was on every field coming up. But you look at the testing numbers and they didn't really jump out to you. Joey Porter ran a 4.6 something. Then he shows up on campus, runs a 4.45 or something like that. Kobe Howard ran a 4.6 last summer. Now he shows up on campus, runs a 4.48. There are leaps to be made because these are 17, 18, 19-year-old kids that can definitely make that maturation. So that's the encouraging part there, is that the development has been good in addition to the guys that they brought in with a great baseline athletic numbers.
So we'll see how all this plays out with Luke Wafle in particular. You guys mentioned Carter Meadows. There's opportunity in the class. It always seems like there's some opportunity at defensive end or at defensive tackle or any of these prized positions, one or two in the region specifically. We'll see how all of that plays out for Penn State football if they can snag one of those guys this year in the class of 2026, which I started out the show generally. The question for today is, how's Penn State doing in terms of setting up the opportunity for 2026? Sounds like with Luke Wafle, they're doing everything they can. They're doing the best job they can to set up for success in the summer so far. So let's get into the guys that have been on campus recently, and we'll have a conversation about more of those names. And then, Ryan, I'm just going to ask you that question a little bit later to see the back end of all the names that we've talked about, how the summer looks from your guys' perspective. But let's start with a couple of guys so I can throw some highlights up here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. If you're watching on if you're listening on the podcast version, I love you guys. You can always check out the highlights on, if you want to just skip to this section on the YouTube show. And as always, if you're listening there, the best way you can help us, I know I always talk about the YouTube channel. If you leave a 5-star rating or interact with the podcast as well, appreciate that so we can grow all the audience so everyone can be under the tent here with BWI. Okay. Enough of that. Ryan, who piqued your attention that visited last weekend or on Tuesday that you want to talk about?
Alex Haskell off the bat, no doubt, because he was expected to come a little later. Didn't. He came sooner. Big reason for that, Duke's out. And Duke was the school I had circled as what I thought could potentially be Penn State's main competitor. Manny Diaz has taken 2 defensive tackles now. And, as I said, Alex was supposed to go to Duke this past weekend. Well, he came to Penn State and said, it was about a week ago to this point. I believe it was more of a Thursday, Friday into Saturday sort of visit. Haskell has been very high on Deion Barnes' board for a long time now. He's still a guy that I feel like we have pretty underrated, especially when you look at team rank or state rankings, things like that, especially compared to how Penn State views him, because he's been, man, I mean, his name has been brought up, I feel like, for a year straight now as far as one of Barnes' top targets in this class. So, look, he's going to Michigan this upcoming weekend. He's never been to Michigan. That's the one thing that's kind of kept me from making a pick. Now, with that said, I think I might still put in a pick. Sean and I have been going back and forth on this for a couple of days now, I feel like. But, he visited Syracuse a couple of weeks ago at the end of March. Good visit. That was his first visit to Syracuse. Penn State's been to 7 times, and now he's about to visit Michigan for the first time. Alex is aiming to make a decision in early May, and then, we'll just take one official visit to whichever school he chooses. So to me, I'd be surprised if it's Syracuse in the end. And what I'm really just mainly focused on is, will Michigan pull out a rabbit out of the hat? Because we've been kind of leaning towards Penn State or penciling him into this class for a long time now. But, man, it's still Michigan. They're a quality program. They have a lot to offer. And man, they've had a lot of success with defensive tackles over the last couple of years. So that's the one thing that's kind of kept me from jumping into that boat and saying Alex Haskell should absolutely be part of this class. But, man, 7 visits now, 1 to Michigan, 1 to Syracuse. Duke was the one school that he's been to 4 or 5 times. Of course, gave him Fontes down there. He was the former St. Joseph's Prep head coach, so there was good ties. And now here we are. Duke's out. So it's hard not to feel really good about Penn State's chances, but you just never know, especially in this day and age too, with NIL and all those things. I don't really get the sense that it's a massively important thing to Alex, but at the same time, like, this was a conversation I was having with somebody the other day. Like, if money's not top 3 with all of these guys, then I think you're kind of BSing it, because it should be at this point with how much the money has grown to being hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's still a very important to all of these guys to some degree. I'm not saying relationships, proximity to home, playing time, NFL, it's all great. But when you don't know how much money involved or how important it is, it's just, for me at least, it's made it harder for me to say, yeah, this guy's absolutely coming to Penn State, especially when a school like Michigan's involved.
Are there any other guys that you feel like are on kind of a similar trajectory to Haskell, where you're close to that line? And then, who are those guys, maybe if they visited, or just generally, who's the next guy you're interested in?
Well, there's a lot of players I think Penn State's in a great spot with. We've talked about them on this podcast, I feel, for 2+ months now. I mean, right now, today, they're hosting Grayson McHugh. T-Frank, I apologize. I don't know if you had him on our rundown. But I think that's a massively important visit today for a player that they've been in good shape with for a while. Now, at the same time, Grayson hasn't, excuse me, guys, I got something stuck in my throat. Grayson hasn't visited a lot of schools. He just picked up a Notre Dame offer 2 weeks ago, just picked up, I think, Tennessee a couple days ago. So he's quickly taking off. And I am curious to see how maybe that impacts his official visit plans. But, he's been open about the fact that Penn State's a school he grew up supporting. He's been here now a handful of times. Today's, I think, his today's third visit, T-Frank? I don't know if I have it marked there on his profile or not. But either way.
He's had 2. So, yeah, he's got
this will be his third then. Yep. Yeah. So, look, they're in a good spot. He's a very important target to Phil Troutwine. I think he's top 3 for offensive tackles right now. This is my opinion. I'm not exactly sure on that, but Marlon Bright and Grayson McHugh, probably Marky Walbridge as well, all seem to be very high on that board. So big visit today as far as, hey, let's set the groundwork where we're at. Let's get this official visit's already locked in, but let's trend in the right direction. But he's got a Notre Dame visit coming up and just picked up an offer from the Irish 2 weeks ago. So that Notre Dame visit is one to absolutely circle, in my opinion. It'll be an important one. And, let's see if he goes to Tennessee as well. But Grayson just fits Penn State very well. Like that one, you have to feel good about Penn State's chances there.
Fitz, are there any guys that have visited recently that piqued your interest?
Yeah, we talked about Garrett Witherington earlier, the defensive lineman from Alabama. He was up. Jake Krull was on campus on Tuesday. That's one where you're going to have to basically work to get an official visit. He's a really good player. As we talked about edge prospects and different shapes and sizes, Jake Krull, not the 6'5" guy, but a heck of a football player at IMG. He was up, and I believe he's at Oklahoma today. So he's kind of all over the place, kind of setting the table for the summer. If he's got some his eyes on some schools that he wants to visit. And Penn State, he's been up here twice, and they've impressed him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're in the lead or anything like that, but they've impressed him, and we'll see. I mean, it's kind of on the fringe of whether or not Penn State gets an official visit right now. So the linebackers over the weekend, Matthew Canoe, Nick Abrams, Ryan mentioned, I think, Brian Bonner, the running back that was here. I'm moving too fast for your graphics. Sorry, T. Frank.
That's all good.
Brian
they'll
Bonner
play when they play.
California on Tuesday, as Penn State continues to recruit running backs with Messiah Mickens still in the fold there. Ricardo Kitchen, kind of a new name Penn State offered him this week. He's number 11 overall in the On3 industry rankings in the class of 2027. Muskegon, Michigan had a couple of, I think, had a van load of guys in for practice on Tuesday. So He's a good looking kid. I haven't really looked deeply into the tape yet, but good looking kid is another defensive end that's out there. And then Cannon Smith from Colorado was in the other day for an unofficial visit. He'll be back for an official visit this spring. He's a guy that Ryan has mentioned a bunch as just one of those guys that is just outside the bubble, but also a guy that's probably higher on Penn State's list than a lot would give credit for if you followed it day to day.
Yeah, I want to T-Back. I got so much I could go on with that. Good stuff, Sean. Cannon Smith fits Penn State incredibly well. He's from Colorado, right? So he's not a guy we've talked about a ton, but just the feedback there is, man, Penn State kind of wishes they were on him earlier. And don't get me wrong, he's one of those players who really took off in the January period. Obviously, his junior season film played a big part in that, but he is probably the player I am focused on the most as far as getting in touch with today, because there's been a lot of positive feedback about how he fits Penn State, and I really want to learn how this visit went. Last two things I want to add. We talked a lot of offensive linemen there, but two guys we kind of one flew under the radar, and that's Marky Walbridge this past week. He visited the same day as Alex Haskell was last Thursday, and Marky Walbridge does not talk about his recruitment much. It is hard to get details, but right now, from what I've gathered, it feels like a Michigan, Penn State, Boston College battle. I know Boston College probably isn't considered to be on the level of those other two schools, but I don't want to rule them out just because this is a recruitment that has been incredibly quiet. I mean, the details and the info we have on the vast majority of other players who have visited recently is substantially more than what we have on Marky Walbridge. But he is very high on Troutwine's board. He's now visited, I believe, 3 or 4 times and is expected to come back for an official visit. So just keep him in mind, because it's Marky's a player. What the heck is in my throat right now? Marky's a player I don't feel like we've talked about a ton just because he doesn't talk, but he's very high on that board and somebody that fans really need to pay attention to, I think, this summer. And one other one I want to mention too is Jack Fuchs from Tennessee. I think it's how we say his last name. I'm not going to try to figure it out, but
otherwise I think I have to change the settings of the video.
Exactly. We'll go with Fuchs, but listen, the key thing here is his dad is now an assistant offensive line coach at Tennessee Titans. Where was he before that? He was with Nittany at Buffalo and at Kansas. He just spent 5 days on campus.
Wow.
Why'd they spend 5 days here? Because apparently mom and Nittany's wife are like best friends, and they kind of made a vacation out of it. So there's an official visit now set for June 20th to 22nd. I think Penn State has a very good shot if that's the direction they go. Again, I mentioned earlier, Marlon Bright, who also snuck on the campus last week. There's another one we didn't even get into. I feel like we could do an entire podcast just on the offensive line board right now, because there's about 20 guys that Penn State seems to be in the mix with. But there's a lot of quality options at offensive tackle. We'll see what happens with Fuchs. Right now, I think Kentucky, Indiana, Penn State, they seem like the 3 schools that are kind of in the mix there. But that relationship with Nittany is very strong. And now Penn State, after getting him back on campus, Troutwine, Franklin, everybody else, they seem to be more engaged, more interested than ever in potentially taking this commitment. So official visit season, like everybody else, will play a big part now.
Yeah. There's a lot of tackles on that list. They've already got Kevin Brown. They've already got 6 deep at tackle right now. You can never have enough of these guys. You can never have enough of great football players. Does position factor in your mind in terms of guys that have position versatility to play inside outside? Do you have a read on how these guys might fit inside outside from what you've seen? Because obviously Grayson McHugh's 6'7". Some of these guys are 6'8". Those are tackles unless something crazy happens differently. But there's a ton of really positive names there, and I know they can't take all of them.
Sean, I think you'd agree. Trout wants true tackles to be tackles, and then he wants potential tackles to play inside. Basically, like Kevin Brown, if they get Marlon Bright and a handful of these guys that we think that they can get at offensive tackle, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Kevin Brown starts out as a guard. If they miss on some of those guys, then
kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah, but there's so many options right now. We just kind of have to see where the chips fall. But the main thing is, he wants that athleticism that could play tackle to be more inside, and then he wants that 6'6", 6'7" guy that can develop and grow to be on the anchor.
They used to blur that line between guard and tackle in the not good way. but now it's better. Yeah, you got guys that can play tackle that are playing guard right now, and you want the most athletic guys out there. You want the longest guys out there, and if Cooper Cousins does end up being a center, you got a 6'5", 6'6" center like that. I mean, that's a pretty big group right there. So it's been amazing to watch that transformation. I wrote about it yesterday in Trimmings. It's pretty incredible to think about where Phil Troutwine was 4 years ago and where he's at right now. So he's done an amazing job. So that's pretty cool. And by the way, Cannon Smith, Valor Christian. Did you see the story with Valor Christian yesterday, Ryan?
No, I did not.
All right. So Mike Stanford's the head coach there. He's just named the head coach there. He coached at Colorado. He coached at Minnesota. It's where Christian McCaffrey went to high school. But Brock Huard, who I think he was like the second or third team college football guy for Fox, took the tight ends coach job at Valor Christian. So Valor Christian is putting together a super staff in Colorado. And there's a handful of really, really good programs out there in Colorado, and Cherry Creek's right there. And I think Penn State just offered a kid from Cherry Creek. But it's pretty impressive to see that come together. We've seen this before in different areas of the country, but it's crazy when a guy will leave a job like that. I know he's got a kid on the team, but will leave a job like that to go coach high school football. Is pretty amazing.
Probably getting sick of traveling. Yeah.
There have been a lot of Colorado guys that have come up on the show recently, and a lot of conversation about that. I don't want to get too far into like not football, but demographics are changing. Like, people are moving different places in the world. I don't know if people are moving to Colorado or not. I'm not up on that, but it just seems like there are certain hot spots that are kind of bubbling up in other different places. I wanted to get to defensive tackle, back to Garrett Witherington and some of the other guys that are on the board for Penn State at defensive tackle. And this is more of a comment. I don't really have a question here. I just want to maybe get some feedback on this thought. Even going back to T.A. Cunningham, and I know part of that is just like maybe you're taking a flyer, but Deion Barnes seems to be a really good technical coach. Yeah, they had a big class. Why not take that guy? Because they had other guys in the class that you felt pretty good about.
Yes, very much.
But it just seems like maybe in the past they weren't willing to take flyers. They wanted guys that would hit. But Deion Barnes is a really good technical coach. I've watched him enough up close and in person to know, like, this is somebody who relates to players well, communicates really well, and can. I was talking to Landon Tangwell, friend of the show, and we were just having a conversation about, yes, Abdul Carter deserves his praise as the number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick. He wasn't that good in the blue-white game. We watched him in the spring. He was not that good of a pass rusher. He wasn't that good of a pass rusher against West Virginia. He was a really, 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 really good pass rusher. Maybe one of the best in terms of having the most moves to use by the end of his career when he's playing with one arm against Notre Dame. That doesn't happen with just Abdul Carter. That's not just him. Deion Barnes has a hand in that as well. So that's a long way to say, in T. Frank's tangents, at defensive tackle, if you take some guys like Garrett Witherington, who's 6'5", 270, but is super raw. Like, you watch the highlights here, and it's not even, anyone can see. Like, the dude runs straight up. Like, he does not have pad level. He doesn't really have a plan with his hands. Can Penn State take some bigger chances at defensive tackle and maybe hit a little higher than they have without having to reach for the 5-star defensive tackle? I think even a guy like Brian Harris is in this conversation of ultra athletic. He's got a big body. Reminds me a little bit of Keziah Izzard in that sense of maybe he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he's got complete defensive tackle size and metrics and things, but it doesn't feel like a guy that plays a complete game just yet. And I know that no high school player does. I'm just wondering if Barnes can reach a little bit into the toolsy bag and come out with some guys that can play one tech, that can be that nose tackle type, even though you're playing in the Penn State system where everyone's got to be able to move. So I'm just curious to see how that plays out in the spring. And I don't know if you guys had any thoughts.
You have to take chances on defensive tackle. Like, there's a reason 5-star defensive tackles are as coveted as they are, because it's a hard position to find all the ingredients that you want at such a position. So you kind of have to take chances there. You kind of have to find guys that have 7 of the 10 qualities that you want, and you got to figure out the rest. So I feel like Penn State's been doing that for a long time at that position. I don't really think a whole lot's changed there, but that's also why Keyshawn Stansel is so incredibly important to Deion Barnes in this class, because, I guess Damari Simi you can put in there too, but for the most part, he's the guy that has most of the ingredients that you're looking for at the moment.
So I guess the last thing here on the show, as we round in the final 10 minutes, is to talk about the upcoming guys. We've mentioned a couple of them so far. Grayson McHugh coming up. I believe you said tonight.
He's today. Yeah. He's already here. Yep.
Yeah. What are some of the names of, looking forward into the weekend that you think are interesting that you're going to be writing about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com? Great reason to sign up and read what Ryan gets on the back end of these visits. Who are the players that you're already circling that you want to talk to after their visit?
Well, Jackson Ford's here today too. I'm not sure if we mentioned that as well, but I actually literally just wrote this story, like literally just posted it as soon as we were
on the site right now.
Yeah. So hey, if you want to subscribe, go check it out because that's exactly what I just wrote 1,200 words on. What I would say is, of course, McHugh and Jackson Ford today are incredibly important. I confirmed two not massively, but pretty important visitors yesterday for Penn State. We mentioned one of them earlier. The other one is Jazeel Hart, a pretty good cornerback prospect that right now seems to be all about Penn State, Notre Dame, and Michigan. That'll be a little bit later in the month. As far as this weekend goes, T. Frank, like there's not – I got to work on this weekend's list, and I'm striking out a lot, so it kind of makes me wonder how big this weekend's list will be. Gotcha. The one guy I will mention for sure is Jordan Deck, important safety prospect for Penn State. Originally, it sounded like he wanted to come for the spring game. Then he gets back to me as soon as I post that he's coming to the spring game and says, nope, I'm coming this weekend, which is a little bit of the inside world of how recruiting works, right? It was Sean, I sent you the screenshot. I mean, it was right after it, which was
it was right after. It happened. It happens more than we would care to admit. It's
right. It is what you're dealing with teenagers,
17, 18-year-old kids.
Yeah. So anyway, he's out of Texas. Look, Jordan, I did an interview with Jordan not that long ago, and he was very adamant about the fact that he needed to visit some of his top schools 2 times. And then when I asked him, do you got any spring visits? He was like, no. I was like, well, if you want to commit in June or July, you kind of need to figure that out. So I think it is really important that Penn State is getting him back up here this upcoming weekend, or not back up here for the first time, because this just seems to be a player that, just from my interview, I've only talked to him for 15 minutes, but he does seem to have a lot of the qualities, cares about the things that fits Penn State, just from a leadership maturity perspective, things like that.
And he's 6'3", which is exactly what Penn State's looking for at safety.
Obviously pretty good athlete too. But it's an intriguing visit to me because they have Matt Sieg already committed, David Davis, is probably likely to be a little bit more of a safety in the next level. But you have Joey O'Brien still out there, some others. Like the safety board is an interesting one. And this is a guy that they've kind of had circled for a while now. Penn State's gone down there to check him out, I think, twice now. So they are familiar with him, and there's a good relationship there. He just hasn't gotten on campus. So how this visit goes, could play a big part in Penn State's chances, because there's everything he knows relationship-wise about the program and Dex seems to be pretty positive, but he's got to get to State College and check that out first.
This seems like an interesting situation here. If you're watching the YouTube show, I'm showing you the visitor center for these guys as we're getting into the conversation about visits. So SMU, he's visited the most. Baylor, Texas A&M. Only one of those teams is on his official visit list. He's got Baylor, Mississippi State, Penn State, Michigan, and UCLA. That feels like a very diverse set of schools that he's got in his official visit list. So I don't know how to read that. And Ryan, I think you laid it out.
It's pretty wide open. That's how I'd read it. That like a school like a Penn State up north going for a guy from Texas. Like I think there is a chance, honestly. And again, I've only talked to him for 15 minutes, right? So I don't want to pretend like I have this great background on him. But just the feedback was more encouraging than I expected it to be. I was pretty impressed with his knowledge of everything, and the details and stuff that he's researched about Penn State. So time will tell. I also do want to mention real quick that Maxwell Hiller will be back this upcoming weekend. He put that out on Twitter a little bit ago. We've had him on. I think I confirmed that a week or two ago. But really, Maxwell Hiller is going to be a player I feel like we are talking about constantly over the next. We already have been. Let's be honest. He's a 2027 prospect out of Coatesville, and is lining up to be one of the absolute best prospects in the state for the 2027 class. So getting him back is pretty important because he's been Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina. He's been visiting a lot of other prominent programs lately, and it's been a couple of months since he's been on campus.
Fitz, we had planned on talking about Terrence Smith earlier in the week. We did not get to him during your recruiting update earlier in the week. What was interesting about Terrence Smith to you in terms of talking about him this week?
Yeah, this is a guy that is getting to a national level. Like he's not at a typical talent-producing school, Lansdale Catholic. Originally I think some people were looking at him as a defensive lineman, but I think he's going to grow into an offensive tackle. I'm still waiting on some numbers for him to figure out what's what there. But
quite angry.
Yes, he's quite angry. He's quite big. He's been on campus before. I believe Ryan, was he at the Whiteout?
Yes.
Last year? So he's got he's got some things going for him. He picked up that Notre Dame offer on the Pot of Gold Day on St. Patrick's Day or whatever it was. So like he's on the national radar, and it's not really a guy that how do I say this? We've known about Max Hiller for a long time. We've known about Leighton Von Brandt for a long time. This guy is just sort of on the ascent, and I think that that's pretty exciting right now. So he's definitely one that we've been watching for a while. Kind of thought Penn State would offer a little bit earlier, but they got him on campus. And sometimes it's best to, if you don't offer in January, February, just get them on campus and be like, okay, we wanted to, check you out and all this stuff that they say to make you feel better about the later offer than some other schools. But no, I think it's a good offer for Penn State. I think he's an athletic kid, shows that on tape, and he gets after it. So I'm excited to see his progress. I don't have his ratings on hand. T. Frank, do you have that?
He's a top 100. Yeah, he's up there,
top
man.
100.
I believe so.
I'll get that for you in a second.
Going back to the 2027 mantra, it's still really early.
He's number 93 in the country.
Still a lot of things that look very good on his tape and his profile and just his overall demeanor.
Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry about that.
Wrong Terrence Smith.
Too many Terrence Smiths. He's not ranked yet. That's why he wasn't the first. He wasn't the first search. Here we go. I got it.
We have Terrence as an interior offensive lineman. That's going to be wrong though. He's going to be an offensive tackle. So that'll have to get fixed at some point. But he's really taking off right now. Tennessee's a school very interested in. I interviewed him earlier in the week, and I think Penn State is off to a fine start. I don't think a late offer or anything like that had a big impact on him. And a lot of the offers he has gotten recently have been during visits. I think it's important to note that as well, because he's been traveling around a little bit. I do know he's going to Ohio State this weekend, so let's see where he stands with the Buckeyes. That's always important. South Carolina then should be on April 19th. So this summer will be interesting too. I think he does plan to camp. Well, let me clarify. He tore his ACL last year. He's getting pretty good now. I mean, actually, you know what? Never mind. I'm mixing him up with somebody else. He definitely tore his ACL. He's definitely not camping. Never mind. Wrong kid. There's so many of them. I mix them up, man. Leave me alone. He's Allen Iverson's second cousin, by the way. That's another.
Really?
There you go. And Allen Iverson's very close with Marcus Hagans. So boom, there it is. No, I've got nothing. Let's
make an RPM
right here. It's Masters Thursday, so I'm keeping an eye on the phone, keeping an eye on the show as well. But also Frozen 4 Day. Penn State plays tonight, 8:30 against Boston University. Tune in. It's been an awesome run for them, obviously. We're not hockey experts or anything like that, but it's been really, really fun. Probably the most fun sport to follow, like if you're not attached to it at all. I guess wrestling is pretty fun if you're a Penn State fan, but it's going to be cool. It's going to be a special experience. And Guy Gadowski, from early in the season when it didn't look like they were really going anywhere, to turn it around, certainly deserves credit. Those players deserve credit, and I'm excited to watch them.
Ryan, you've given us a lot of thoughts here on the second half of the show. Any final thoughts that you want to get out and preview what's coming up this weekend from you?
Just trying to figure out who's all visiting this weekend. Like I said, it's kind of small right now, so that's going to be a big focus. Is it just a small weekend because it's a small weekend, or am I missing like 20 guys and I need to get to work? So we're going to try and work on that this afternoon. Like I said, there may be some RPM picks. We're working on some things right now that's trying to lock down one or two more sourced information, I guess you would say. But there's a ton going on. Like recruiting is in full swing. May's going to be May's going to be more fun to watch than I think in a long time when you add in those official visits and the fact that it's a contact period now. Like it used to be a little bit like May was kind of chill. Like my wife was trying to plan a trip for mid-May. Can't do it. It is all work from here on out until mid-July.
That's good. I haven't taken any days off yet this year, so that was a tactical error. Coming up for me later today, I'm going to be writing a little bit about Drew Aller. Got to talk to Danny O'Brien after practice. Had some interesting insight into the quarterback room and to I think Drew in particular, obviously as the number one guy at the position. So all that coming up at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. As always, the best way to get that information is to subscribe. Both here on the YouTube channel, which is free. Liking the video is free. Interacting if you're watching on the replay. Always appreciate your thoughts and comments in the comment section. But if you want to help us out with, and we can help you out more on the BlueWhiteIllustrated.com side of things, you subscribe for a week. You get it for $1. You get to try us out. And then, of course, as a lot of people would attest to, you get addicted to the information that these guys give you in recruiting. So that's all coming up this weekend from us. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr for Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder. We will be back on Tuesday with more information, more conversation, and more nonsense from me on the BWI Live show. We'll talk to you then.